Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of ReTFOS, where I take old videos and update them to modern audio standards. If you like this sort of content, I would be honored if you hit the like and subscribe button. But more importantly, let's head on to the story. Some Lost Words Aren't, written by RegalLegalEagle.
Captain Xavier Blood-Eye Touch, you have been tried and found guilty of the following crimes: piracy in the first degree, murder in the first degree, destruction of national treasure, grand theft, spaceship, armed robbery, kidnapping, and public drunkenness and indecency. You have been sentenced to hang by the neck until dead. Do you have any last words?
The large human seemed unusually subdued as he stood on the raised platform in the Leviathe city. His hands were bound behind his back, and while he'd been disarmed, they let him keep his crimson coat and hat, so the crowds could see that it was truly the dreaded pirate. His shoulders were slumped, and his head was lowered, but at the request of the last words, he muttered something. The grinning Leviathe judge stepped closer then, obviously excited to be ridding the galaxy of the pirate.
What was that?
The blue-skinned Xeno asked as he stepped closer. His clothes as well-tailored and fancy as one would expect of a Leviathe judge. His perfectly shined wig balanced atop his otherwise smooth head.
Is the Dread-Eye Pirate finally understanding his place before his execution?
Stepping forward, the Xeno got close to the human so that he could hear his final words. But when he leaned in close, Tetch whispered, "Always time to draw more blood." Then in a flash, he pulled his head back and slammed it forward into the Xeno's nose. There was a crunch as the judge staggered back with a gasp, green blood dripping from his clearly broken nose. The human stood straight there, a good head taller than the Xeno guards who pulled him back. "You know what I have to say to the lot of you," he called out, voice booming around the square. "You've got shit for treasure. I've killed your stupid little love tree years ago, and you're still pissed. Get over it. How many of you have truly lived? You all live in safety and boredom. You string your lives along from day to day, working and slaving away for shit you don't need and debt you tell yourself was unavoidable. I've killed more than everyone here put together, and I still have people from all corners of the galaxies flocking to my flag because they want a chance to really live, to loot and plunder and pillage, and then spend all they got in whores and rum until we head out and do it again. You can try and kill my mortal body, but my legend will never die." With that, he tossed his head back and letting out a deep laugh that filled the square as the crowd murmured and muttered at this display. "Noted." A Leviathe stepped forward then, his fancy gold-trimmed cloak, coat, and wig, making it clear that he was a magistrate and not just a simple judge. "But we will settle for killing your mortal body." With a nod to the guards, they struggled to push the human forward, having to repeatedly shock him with their batons as he growled and staggered, but was finally pushed into position beneath the noose. One of the guards had to stand on a step stool to reach up and get the noose around Tetch's neck. But then Tetch kicked the stool out from under the guard, making the Xeno tumble and fall to the platform. Even as the guard shocked the pirate again for his resistance, the human let out another deep laugh. He clearly had no concept of going down easily. "Know this," he called out, ignoring the shocks, it seemed. "My crew has vacancies. We know no species, no religion, no prejudice. Most of all, no debt. Any of you are welcome, but you must pull your weight or be tossed out in airlock. If you want to live, then seek me out."
"That is quite enough of that,"
the magistrate hissed out. Then, as he approached the human, ignoring the pirate's glares and scowls,
"You have a noose around your neck, and you act as if you're going to escape. I'm sorry to disappoint, but you're going to die here today, pirate, and the birds will peck out your eyes in a few days."
Tetch just laughed at that, which made the magistrate growl.
"You humans may be hard to kill, but being hung by the neck until dead works on you just fine."
"Oh, some of us, sure, but I'm afraid that a few of us just simply refuse to die," Tetch replied, staring down at the fancily dressed Xeno before him.
"You're simply delusional, human,"
the magistrate hissed out. "Your crew abandoned you at the first chance. When you rule by fear, they have no loyalty to you, only your ability to harm them. And you can't harm them now, can you? Ha! You think I rule by fear? You have no idea how I work then. Tetch chuckled. I treat my lads well. I surely do. Lads, lasses, assorted of what have you. If your crew, your family. Sure, we may try and stab each other in the back from time to time, but treasure does funny things to a pirate's brain. He shrugged. It's all part of the fun. He grinned wide, then showed off his pearly whites, plus one gleaming gold tooth.
Do you have any actual last words? The magistrate finally asked.
You best hope the drop breaks my neck in the fall, Tetch said simply.
Oh, but it won't. We've gone through a great lengths to ensure that you'll hang and kick and struggle as your face turns purple, your eyes pop from your skull, and you suffocate as the flames of your hell lap at your feet. The magistrate hissed out, but Tetch just laughed in the Xeno's face, bits of spit splattering across the otherwise pristine blue face. The magistrate let out a disgruntled gasp and stepped back, pulling a silk handkerchief from her pocket to wipe his face clean. You're a fool, then, for these won't be my last words. That blood-red cybernetic eye of Tetch's gleamed down at the magistrate, who just looked over and nodded at the guard at the side of the platform. The other stepped back away from the trapdoor as Tetch stood tall, head held high as he waited. The magistrate nodded once more, and the lever was pulled, the trapdoor dropping out from under his feet. He plunged down through the opening, the rope snapping tight as he jerked in the air. He gasped out and growled, kicking as his neck felt the pressure of the rope starting to dig into his flesh. The square was silent aside from the human's grunts and growls as he kicked in the air, struggling and squirming. The magistrate allowed himself a grin at the job finally done. But that's when a shot rang out through the air and the rope snapped. The crowd began to scream and scatter as the guards rushed towards the trapdoor, but Tetch was already moving. The moment his boots hit the ground, he was running forward. One of the guards beneath the platform was hastily trying to pull his pistol free, but Tetch tucked his head down, slamming into the Xeno's chest and smashing him against one of the platform's posts. There were more shots ringing out amidst the screaming and chaos as Tetch quickly pressed a button on the side of his mechanical hand to make it simply pop off. As it clattered to the stones, he brought his other hand up, the bindings now useless. There was a cluster of Leviathe guards ahead of him, some firing out into the crowd, some turning to look his way. He just grinned wide and crouched down, opening his compartment in his mechanical leg to pull out a canister free, which he tossed at the feet of the Leviathe guards at the front of the platform. There was a flash as clouds of smoke began to pour forth, causing them to cough and try to cover their mouths. That gave the pirate time to grab his mechanical hand quickly, shoving it back into place on his arm as he rushed forward. Grabbing the nearest guard, he pulled the Leviathe over his head, throwing him into the other guards in the smoke, his red cybernetic eye seeing through the clouds easily. Rushing out into the scattered and screaming crowd, he shoved his way through the running civilians to the edge of the square where a figure was waving at him. "Higgs!" he called out, slapping his trusty first mate on the back, making the colorful parrot-like Xeno stagger forward. "Did it all go as planned?" "Mostly, sir. Should we get out of here?"
he asked, handing over Tetch's prized pistols. The human let out a hearty laugh as he once more had Athena and Aphrodite in his hands. The Leviathe guards were finally starting to figure out what was going on in the square as the magistrate shouted at them to start shooting and ignore the crowd. "Good idea," Tetch muttered and ran on with Higgs by his side. Other members of the crew were retreating from the places around the square to join them as they ran through the cobblestone streets of the Leviathe city. There was another group of pirates waiting ahead of them outside of an old and well-known Leviathe building. One of his shuttles hovered over it, a cable reaching in through the front door of the structure. "Higgs, this was your plan, so you do the honors." The parrot blinked at that before grinning as well as the Xeno could.
"Well, thank you, sir."
He pulled the radio from his belt. "We're all set, let her rip." The shuttle began to pull up, and there was a crashing, crunching sound coming from inside the building, before a giant metal vault wrapped in a specifically made cargo net was yanked free of the building, smashing through the front of it. In the distance, Tetch could hear the sound of the boots on the cobblestones, as no doubt the guards chased after them, so he jumped onto the cargo net, clinging to it as the rest of his crew followed suit. He laughed heartily as they were hoisted up into the air then, him and his crew clinging to the dangling vault for dear life as they flew over the tops of the ancient and picturesque Lecat houses in the old city. A fine plan indeed. Now, you said things mostly went as planned, Higgs. Did you wipe out the servers? He asked as they both dangled from the cargo netting, flying through the air.
Yes, sir. Wiped clean of all debt they had on record.
The Xena nodded. Well then, obviously we have a vault, so what's different? Tetch asked.
We found a whole suitcase of this stuff.
Higgs carefully wrapped one arm around the netting as he used his other to pull a small plastic bag from one of his pockets filled with a white powder. As he handed it to Xavier, the human pirate grinned wide. He knew what it was right away, but he opened the packet with his free hand to be extra sure. When he took a sniff of the powder, he laughed deeply, hanging off the netting by one mechanical arm. Ha! The finest Colombian cocaine! He shouted. Ah! It's not the jewels and gold, but cash and coke will do just fine. It's a wonderful life to be a pirate sometimes, Higgs. Now, let's get back to the ship, burn our engines for Nouveau Cuba, and have a party. Coke, coffee, and chocolate, Higgs. The treasures of this new world gave birth to pirates, and now they make sure the humans throw the best fecking parties. The human laugh echoed out over the city as he and his crew clung to the vault. They might be bloodthirsty criminals, but clearly they had a good time doing it. And if one thing was certain to the Lecat after all of this, there was a reason people kept becoming pirates. If not for adventure and freedom, then certainly for the parties. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Bushmaster 177, Henry the Red, Caspar Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon WRE, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.